Finally, I'm going to be the person God created me to be. And it was hiding in there all this time. It was like a bird in a cage, the moment that the bird's free, I had this surge of this is me. I may not convince every single person out there in the world that disability is okay. And it's not my obligation to do so. I just am going to do the best job I can at being me. People oftentimes disable themselves, I guess, with their own limited mindsets. And it's really about not putting those limitations on yourself, but breaking free of them.
Confidence does not come from having all the answers. It comes from the willingness to try. My friends, that is a quote from today's guest. Her name is Jessica Cox. She's going to join us on the Live Inspired podcast. You may want to buckle up. You will need it as we elevate into life. This is a woman who is a skilled scuba diver. This is a woman who is a black belt. This is a woman who is a pilot. This is a woman who is a speaker who has traveled around the world delivering powerful messages. And behind the scenes, one of the things that makes Jessica so remarkable, this is a woman who was born without arms. She had and has every reason in the world, if she wants one, to make excuses on why she can't do difficult, hard things. And yet, due to her family's influence, due to her own resolve, and due to her willingness to make tomorrow better than yesterday, this is a woman who is soaring in life. She's going to join me in a moment so that you can recognize how your challenges don't have to define your future. You are going to love this conversation with our pilot today. I'll be the co-pilot. Her name is Jessica Cox. Jessica, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you for having me. Finally, we get to meet.
I have been hearing your name almost for as long as I've been a speaker. So that alludes to the fact that you and I both have a shared profession. We have some shared friends. I think we have a shared love of life and love of using our story to impact others. If you were to bump into someone in an airport, that's where you're taking this call from right now, and
Hmm.
they say, Jessica, what do you do for a living? How do you respond
And
to that?
well, that is definitely where we should start clarifying because if you were to Google me, it'd probably come up as, first armless pilot, pioneer in aviation. I'm in the Smithsonian on the Mall in Washington, D.C. They'll have all that. But first and foremost, I'm a child of God and most definitely an evangelist for how beautiful my faith is in my life. And that is what moves me every single day. I happen to do flying and have broken some records as meaning the world Guinness World Record for being the first pilot to fly with my feet. And I also practice martial arts, so I'm a fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo, and all of that has worked in a way to really set me up as a speaker of 18 years in 29 countries. And it's a beautiful way to marry all of that together to do the outreach, the work to reach others, to give hope.
When you finally come back from those 28 countries and those flights and the Smithsonian and the main stage and everything else you have going on professionally, what do you do at home?
So at home, I actually enjoy cycling. I enjoy, I was, I'm a woman of faith. So I had a women's meeting at the church last night. So faith is a part of my everyday. And I have a wonderful husband. He's also a pilot. He actually became a pilot after me. So we didn't even, when we met, he wasn't a pilot. And we had the shared common ground of Taekwondo because he's a fifth degree black belt in Taekwondo. So he and I went flying together this morning. It was beautiful as pilot couple. And we have a nice, cute little fur baby, Chewy. So I am a dog mom and I love him to pieces. He has been a wonderful part of our life for the past 4.5, almost 5 years now.
So, Jessica, when people hear your voice, they hear joy. For those who are watching our conversation on the channels, they're seeing you just shine. That's what I look at right now. And if they weren't really listening closely, they may have missed the fact that you said armless, armless. You only mentioned it once, and then you immediately went on to pilot, and you immediately went on to Taekwondo, and you immediately went on to speaker around the world, and all these other things you're doing. And a major part of what you've overcome is the fact that you don't have arms.
True. Yes. And I don't even think about overcoming it so much as it is a part of who I am. And I have had to go through life in a world engineered for arms and hands. There's no doubt about that, which made
Yeah.
things a little bit more complicated to people who maybe could not think outside the box. But like I always say, think outside the shoe. And for me, that message helps others to not get stuck on something that they're faced with, to be able to see past it and to see the positive.
So let's go back to that childhood that formed you. I'm amazed by what you're doing today, but I know that without some of the moments from your childhood and those who raised you, that you and I aren't having this conversation. Not only you, but also me. I'm shaped by mighty parents, by these experiences of childhood, and a man and a woman who said, "John, you can do hard things." So let's talk about you. Let's start with your dad first. Tell me about your dad.
Okay, it's funny because my dad took a trip to the airport with me today, so he's in the lobby in the next room. And that's just, he was my first passenger, just to give you an idea. He spoke up when a fighter pilot crossed my path and said, "How would you like to fly in an airplane?" And he was standing right beside me, and I was hesitating because it was my greatest fear, but he jumped in and said she would love to.
Hmm.
So that's my dad, and he's always been there for me and support of the things that I do. And of course, I kind of drag him along to all the things that I do now that I'm such a doer of things. And my mother is, I'm going to jump into my relationship with my beautiful mom, who just was the ultimate encourager throughout my childhood, saying, "Yes, you can do it." And not only that, but she lived it. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about my mom. And she didn't talk much, and I'm not, I know I'm a motivational speaker, but I did not a talker, and I'm more of a person of action. And that's exactly what my mom was for me. She was a living example of nothing is impossible.
Have you heard like in the family lore, the stories they tell of when they went from feeding you, your little applesauce for a while, then the crackers into your mouth to saying, you know what, maybe rather than feeding her, we should let her feed herself. At what age did they start treating you not as if you had a disability, but as if this was just you and it was a gift and you were going to figure out how to become the best version of yourself?
Well, that was a process because I think the hope of me using my feet and my toes as hands in substitution of not being born with arms and hands like my brother and my sister, they started to see that naturally develop. And it was just small things here and there. I mean, I disassembled a bullpen with my toes. I think I was must have been 3 years old, and I just twisted that bullpen, and I just opened it up, and I then put it back together, and they saw me and they're like, "Wow, she can put that pen together. She's pretty good with her toes." I remember my grandfather wanting me to do that for him a couple times because he was in disbelief.
Yeah.
And then when I was 4, if I remember right, it may have been 4 or 5, where I wrote my name with my right foot with just a pencil between my toes. So they saw this adaptability of a young child who's born a certain way and starts to develop skills with what they have and what they've been given. And it's this natural process. It's nothing, and it was nothing that had to be essentially forced upon me. It just became a natural part of my growing up.
You use prosthetics for early years, off and on. And then at the end of seventh grade, as you bumped in toward eighth grade, you decided to set them down and leave them on the ground. Tell me what that was about.
So I think everyone has a certain pressure to conform in their life, no matter who they are. And whether it's you're a teenager and you have to wear the same clothes as everyone else. I think that was the same thing for me, is that there was this expectation that if she doesn't have arms, we need to give her arms. So I
Hmm.
was given arms at age 5, and then I started to wear these, and I went through a lot of hours of therapy, how learning how to use it, because it wasn't natural as my toes and my feet are. It was like I had to learn how to eat with them, I had to learn how to write with them, and it took more effort because I had to think through, what do I want these prosthetic arms to perform and do? And then I had to go through the motions to make them do that. So it wasn't very efficient as far as time, and I was actually, it was a lot more effortless to use my toes and my feet. But I went through the years to fulfill the expectation. I had prosthetic arms at school with me every single day for
Right.
the first, like you mentioned, so it was 8th grade when I finally just let go of them, realizing why? Why
Hmm.
do I need them?
So it's hard to let go of things, in particular, things that make you look at first glance like everybody else. You're in eighth grade, which is a pivotal year of life, man. You really want to conform with everybody else and fit in and be popular. You board this bus, the door's shut. You begin making that walk down the aisle. What's going through your mind?
Well, making that decision to just leave them behind really propelled me with this like surge of new confidence. Like,
Wow.
finally, I'm going to be the person God created me to be. And it was like, it was hiding in there all this time. It was like a bird in a cage, the moment that the bird's free, I had this surge of this is me. And it was contagious, and people saw it and they felt the energy. So sometimes they even forgot that I didn't have arms. So they had to be
Mm.
reminded when they got to know me long enough. And I mean, I could even sit in the cafeteria somewhere using my toes and my feet, and people thought, oh, that's just her hands. So it was really a sense of finally, I'm going to be the person God created me to be, and there's no turning back. And yeah, there's still going to be people that are going to give me a hard time. I wasn't free from that. There was undoubtedly bullies out there and kids who just wanted to point me out or give me a hard time or anything like that. That's just a part of childhood. And I had to learn how to deal with it. But it wasn't every day. In
Yeah.
fact, I can only probably count close to 5 times that I really had a hard time. And that's pretty easy considering a whole childhood. Um, so for me, it was just like when I'm moving and being in the truth, it felt, and people knew it by the way I carried myself.
Tell me what that means when I'm moving in the truth.
It's just authenticity and it's honesty and it's really being, like I said at the very beginning of the interview, a child of God, and knowing that we're all here for a purpose. We're all part of something greater. And yeah, some of us are different, which is what is actually special about it all, is that no one is going to be like you. We have a uniqueness that we share with the world, and that's something that I had to come to learn to understand and appreciate and see it as a gift.
When we're young, we get our value from external sources. And hopefully as we age, we need less of that. For some of us, you're nodding your heads in agreement. For others, you think I'm wrong, and that's all right. But when you're young, you really need the external smiles and adulation and praise and acceptance. When you were young and you got those glances and those stares or the mom, what's wrong with her questions asked by someone else of someone else, how did you learn to deal with that?
It really depended on the day that I was experiencing it. Some days are harder than others. And just being part of the human experience, some days we have the energy to really stand up for ourselves, and other days we feel like, ah, I just want to, crawl into a ball or something and just hide away from the rest of the world. So it really
Yeah.
depended on how I was feeling. And some days I could just like shrug it off, just let it, hit me and just let it go. And then other days it just felt more impactful than maybe the other day that I experienced it, and it just crushed me. So I think I went to my mom oftentimes and I say, what do I do? And she'd often say, just ignore them, just ignore them. That's a lot easier said than done
For
sometimes.
sure.
So I learned how to really develop a pretty thick skin, I would say, as a young person, and pretty tough in that regard.
Even as we age, for those of us who physically seem fully capable and they seem like their lives are in order, when they deal with those on the outside who judge them or look down upon them for one reason or another, I think most of us take that kind of personally. It's hard not to. You learned how to develop a thick skin. What did you do? What do you do? And what can we do to develop thicker skins in our own lives?
I think the closer and the sooner you can get to the realization that you don't need to be validated or affirmed by acceptance by others. And the recognition for me is that I'm here to be the best version of myself. I may not convince every single person out there in the world that disability is okay, and
Right.
it's not my obligation to do so. I just am going to do the best job I can at being me. And why should I expend the energy towards those other people who will never be convinced, who are not
Mm.
willing to see past it, who are not accepting and have discrimination or have mean thoughts or whatever? Why expend the energy? Because there's so many other good things out there in the world, and that is what you should attract to yourself too, as opposed to dwelling on those people who waste your time.
So that's the external, and then how you develop thicker skin. I was thinking about you today because it was more of an internal issue that I faced in the shower this morning early. I dropped the razor, and I'm like, man, that stinks. Had to pick it down, pick it up. As I'm reaching down and to grab this thing and pick it back up, it falls again from my hands. So that stinks. Then I go downstairs to make myself and my wife a coffee, open up the refrigerator. I drop the creamer. Beth puts it in hers. I don't, but I'm mad at that. Pick it back up, set it on the shelf. As I do, it falls, then it breaks open. Now I'm cleaning up this stupid creamer and wiping it up, and my day has gone poorly because of this disability. My hands aren't the way everybody else's are. And as I'm having this momentary pity party, I start thinking about this woman I get to interview today. This woman who's going to land a plane safely, hop out of that thing, walk through the hangar, get into a green room and visit with me. When you face adversity like that, whatever it might be, and when you drop the razor and when you drop the creamer and when life gets hard, what's your internal dialogue? How do you work through these issues?
Well, it can be frustrating. I mean, we're only human, and it's easy to get frustrated and to get angry about something. One of the powerful things about gratitude is it really helps reframe things for you in the midst of a
Hmm.
difficult time. And I try my best, even if I'm heated or upset or angry or frustrated, to step away from whatever it is. And someone said once, just take, 3 deep breaths in, out, and then maybe reframe it with a little thought of gratitude. And that's what I try my best to do. It doesn't always work because, again, we're all human. But it's amazing how shifting the way that you handle something and perhaps turn it to something you can laugh about or, switch it from being something that really irks you to something that say, you know what, I'm going to just keep doing this. And it helps significantly that power of reframing with gratitude.
You, as a young person, as you board that bus and get off that bus and get back on over time, you eventually fall in love with, I understand you went pre-med. Is that right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
What were you thinking you wanted to do? And ultimately, what did you end up doing?
Well, I thought I was going to become a doctor. And I grew up with a mother who was a nurse, loved medicine. She'd bring me to her work all the time. I'd see her engage with patients and how much they really were inspired by her. And I thought, well, maybe medicine's my thing. And I was pretty sure of that throughout all of childhood until I got to college and I started taking psychology classes and I realized, wow, the brain is pretty powerful. Our minds are powerful. And like that saying, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% of how you respond to it, which I'm sure you're an exact living example of that, John. And I just really liked that power of the brain and the process of how we think and how all of that was in psychology. So I just jumped right into as many psychology classes as I could take. Even though I'd taken all these courses to become a doctor, I switched at about junior year in college and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to do psychology.
Keep walking with me, and then what?
And then I graduated my senior year. I said, well, what am I going to do next? I don't know if I want to go back to school for a master's, which most people who get a degree in psychology go for a master's or a PhD. And I'm not ready to go back to school. So let me think about something else. And that's when the thought of becoming my own business and essentially becoming a speaker. Really, it really was a possibility at that time. It was an exciting possibility. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? There is no real track to becoming a speaker. I mean, what do? You don't go to school to become a speaker. So that's when I reached out to my mentor, which is our friend, our mutual friend, John Foppy, who was also born without arms. He's from the Midwest. And I went to him and I said, well, what do I need to do? And if I remember right, those 3 things he said, number one, join Toastmasters to develop your speaking skills. Number two, get as much speaking experience as you can and hone your story and your message.
Yes,
And then number three was National Speakers Association. We have that in common again too. Is that correct, John? You're in part of National Speakers
we are. Yes.
Association. And so these 3 things, I thought, well, that's doable. I'm going to do that. And I just dove in, you know, just said I'm going to do everything I can to develop this career as a speaker. And about that time is when a fighter pilot came up and said, "Would you like to fly?" And I thought, I keep telling people to never let fear stand in the way of an opportunity. I need to start living that out by becoming a pilot. So it worked. I was about to say hand in hand with the speaking, but it actually foot in
Don't
foot with
use
the
that pun. I
speaking.
mean, please think bigger than that.
Okay.
So, rather than talking about speaking, I think I want to talk about your willingness to take risks. In life, there may not be a bigger risk in some regards than walking onto a stage and vulnerably saying, people, this is me, and I share this for you. Like that is bold. In addition to that, learning how to go up in a winged aircraft above the ground and someone else say, okay, it's your controls, take it, which is bold. In your case, you did that. You also learned how to swim without arms. Everything you've done in your life was this mighty risk. And so I'm curious, did you have parents behind you, in front of you? Was it innate within you that you were always just willing to take the next step, even if there was some risk involved?
Oh, I always had those parents, for sure behind me. I mean, I think at that point when I decided to become a pilot, my mom was really like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" She was
Right.
really, at that point, she was pretty shocked. But I had my faith behind me, and when we have a strong faith, fear, is eliminated. And that's what's so incredible about that is that I prayed every time I took off in a plane during flight lessons. And it really took a lot out of me emotionally. It was exhausting. And I mean, the physicality of it is one thing, but emotionally facing your fear when you learn to fly is another. But my faith is what came in to be able to allow me to do that and stretch myself now. And it has been such a beautiful journey to be able to use it as a means of inspiration for people around the world.
Jessica, what's it like to fly? Very few of our listeners are pilots. Fewer yet are pilots who have no arms. But what is it like for you to just release yourself from the tethers of the earth and take off into the clouds and zoom around by yourself?
Wow, I'm glad I went flying this morning because I have to really bring myself to that first time that I ever did it. And it was that test of faith. The moment my instructor also said, you're suitable to fly this plane alone. And I'm gonna climb out of the cockpit and you're gonna take over the controls as you have been learning in your training. And stay in communication with me along the way on the radios so that at least I hear your voice and I know that things are going well. And so just to give you an idea, I tested out that radio first and foremost because that's what I do. I follow my instructions from my instructor. So I follow the instructions and I said, okay, I can hear you loud and clear. And he could hear me loud and clear. He had a handheld radio. And at that point, he said, okay, now you can take off. And my heart was beating, I was sweating. I was just really excited that finally was the moment that I worked so hard for, emotionally and physically, to be able to get to this point. And no one had ever done this before with their feet on the controls ever in aviation history. So there I was, and I was taxiing away from my instructor, from the only person who could help me in that plane, but he wasn't going to be in there anymore. And so as I taxied away and I got ready to take off, my focus was just, it was perfect focus. I was just so focused on what I was doing, making sure I was doing everything correctly. And my instructor comes on the radio and says, okay, now you can take off. And I go ahead and do everything I do to power up the engine and take off into the sky. And as I'm taking off and lifting up off the ground into the sky higher and higher, I'm so focused, laser focused, that I didn't doesn't even hit me that I'm flying the plane alone. I'm like this robot. And then I turn my first crosswind turn, which is the first turn you make in the pattern, and all of a sudden there's static on my radio. And I'm wondering what's going on because this isn't part of any other flight. This is not an issue I've had before. And I'm trying to communicate with my instructor on the ground, and there's nothing, there's no communication. There's something that happens with my headset. There was something that happened to my headset or my radio. And that is supposedly they say during your solo flight, a lot of times weird things happen. This was definitely a weird moment. I'm like, what am I going to do now? That was the last thing my instructor asked me was to stay in communication with him, and I can't even communicate with him. So I started to panic and worried about what he's thinking. And I'm getting out of my focus and realizing that if I continue down that path, I could lose control of this airplane and it would be the end of me because I'm literally holding life in my 2 feet right now, my life in my own 2 feet. Or I could continue to move forward. And it was in that moment I heard my instructor's voice in my head. He told me time and time again, fly the airplane first, everything else is second. And I sat up taller with those words in my head and I grabbed a hold of the controls even more confidently than before. And I flew that plane and I came in to land. And climbing out of the airplane without any communication with my instructor, the first thing I ask him is, did I scare you? And he says, oh, no, no. He tried to cover it up. But that was for me what solo flight was like. It was this accountability, unlike any other accountability. I mean, it's one thing to drive a car when you're a teenager by yourself, but when you're flying in the sky, and especially
Understood.
when you land successfully on the ground, and you know what you just accomplished, it is magnified like 10 times greater than driving a car by
Mm.
yourself.
I'm going to ask this question in two ways. What did that show you? So what did you learn from that solo flight? And then from those who hear about it, whether it's the pilot on the ground waiting for you, family members, your dad is waiting for you today. When others witness this girl pop out of the cockpit with no arms, what does it reveal to them about life? So first of all, what are you learning every time you go up as a solo pilot?
Oh, for me, it puts a smile on my face, joy. And then I come down and I can't, stop smiling. And that's what it was like for that solo flight. I couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day, knowing that I was able to accomplish my fear and be able to do that. And to others, well, when they see me, it takes a while to really take it in. Like, is she
Yeah.
really? I mean, how does this work? She must have a special airplane. There must be special controls. And why? And really, my plane has no special controls. It's just a standard air coupe airplane.
Yeah.
And so there's all these questions, especially from aviators and pilots, because they know what's going on in the cockpit and they know that they're using their arms and hands. And so they're trying to understand all of that. But then they see me and it's just like, oh my goodness, how exactly does this ha work? But I'm pretty well known now in aviation that people get it. But yeah, when I do catch someone who's caught off guard and they don't know anything about my story, it's really precious.
So I'm going to back up a little bit out of the plane and into childhood and then forward from there. One of the concerns I faced as a young person, even as I overcame physical adversity, was wondering if I would ever find love. Because even if you can do hard things, you wonder if you'll ever find someone who will do hard things with you. And so that's true in my story. And then I talked to my buddy John Foppy, who was born without arms, and he had a very similar struggle. He was able to overcome all kinds of physical adversity, but wondered if he'd ever have anyone to do life with. And he's got a precious story about his wife that he shares. So for you, as you're moving on, in and off the bus and then in and out of judo classes and karate classes and the various things you've done in your life, did you wonder, will I find someone to ultimately do life with going forward?
I think as a young person, that's where I was very fortunate is that my parents were just so supportive and I was part of a unique family that said, if you got married, great. If you didn't get married, great. Live life like that. For me, I always wondered if I did find someone, I would want someone who not only loved me for me, but they love me because they love me for who I am and not because they were inspired by the things that I do
Right.
and also not because they pity me. So I was going to have to find someone who could really see past all these things and be able to see me for me. And that's ultimately what I wanted. And I think God had plans beyond what I had in mind because He put someone in my path and I was at a good place in my life. And my husband at the time was at a good place in his life. And when we crossed paths, I was like, wow, it seems as though this guy, it doesn't even dawn on him. It's not a shock value that I don't have any arms, but he's just interacting with me in a way, in a very human connection. And I'm like, that's exactly what I was hoping to find in someone that I date and take seriously. And, if you're at a good place in your life, you draw the right people to you in the same way I said that earlier. And so he was at a good place and I was, and it was just a beautiful way that we met, sharing the love of Taekwondo. We're both in martial arts.
Even, when we go back on our lives, where things happen that bring us forward into relationships that change us, you just can't plan it. So here you are in a Taekwondo venue on the mat, and one of the instructors is this good-looking man named Patrick. Tell us about Patrick.
So Patrick is the sweetest, patient, human being. My whole family loves him, and they just and I was that way when I first met him, and he sees me from afar, not realizing it at first glance that I don't have arms because I happen to have a long sleeve sweater on. So he thinks my arms are crossed inside because it is a cooler evening, and then he sees me from afar, and he sees my friend who's his co-instructor running up to me to say hello because I trained with her in college. And she comes over and gives me a big hug. And then from the distance, he again looks at me and he sees that I'm not returning the hug with arms. And he's like, who is this rude person who comes into this Taekwondo school and doesn't even return a hug? He later finds out. And, once that was clarified, the rest is history. He would just train me in Taekwondo in the same way he did with other students. He wasn't expecting me to have any special attention. And the same thing, like if he told his students, hey, do 10 push-ups, I would just drop down and do 10 sit-ups. So that was just my modification. And that's how I live life, was just
Mm.
through the lens of modifying it and not being on in the background, just sitting there and not doing anything, but instead jumping into some kind of modification.
When did he go from being an instructor to being an ice cream date? So who
Yeah.
asked who out and where'd you all go?
And it's funny because I didn't even know that story was out there that it was an ice cream date because that was the first date. He
My
was
private investigators have tracked down all your secrets, so nothing is safe with our team.
evidently. That's a good one. That's yeah, you've done your research for sure. So he was an instructor and you can't date your students. So he had accepted a new job in another town. And so when he did that and he closed and locked up the doors of the school that I'd met him in, then it was appropriate timing when he was no longer my instructor to ask me out on a date. And that's when we went to the ice cream place to have ice cream together, and the rest is history. So.
How long have you been together?
And now we are going to celebrate our 14th anniversary in 2 weeks.
When he's bragging, if he was on my podcast and I said, "Man, what do you love most about her?" It's not that she doesn't have arms. It's not that she flies planes. It's not that she's into scuba diving. Like all the accomplishments, it's none of that. So I'm curious if I happen to see Patrick and say, "Man, what are you most wild about when you look at Jessica?" What do you think the answer is?
He'd probably say my adventurous spirit and wanting to go out and do all these things because he comes along. I mean, one day, I think it was my 30th birthday, and we were in an airplane ready for a skydive, and we were up, the 10,000 feet. And I think he turns to me and he says, "You know what? No one actually asked me if I wanted to go skydiving, but I was just being a good sport because it's your birthday." And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And at that point, you can't change anything. You're jumping out of that airplane. But he loved that. And he loves that that's how driven I am to do these adventure seeking things. And
Mm.
he's traveled with me now, probably over 10 of the countries that I've been to. And it's been such a special blessing for both of us to be able to share that with the world, and to share our relationship, not just, not just my story, but we do this together and it's a team.
Mhm. You've been in 25 different countries. You've met audiences around the United States and around the world. And, at first, as a motivational speaker, inspirational speaker, it's you looking out. But afterwards, it's one to one. And I know you and me and most of my friends who do this work, like that's why we do it actually. Is there an interaction as you look around the countries you've been to of one person that you met that reminded you, like, man, I think that's why I do this work? Is there one conversation you had afterwards?
Yes, there has to be that story about being in the middle of Ghana, in the capital city, Accra. And right there in the middle of this big city is one of the biggest venues for their events. And we're there, and I'm getting ready to speak, and I'm in the green room behind backstage. And in the green room, it's just myself and my husband in that green room. No one else is in there. But there's a knock on the door, and I go to open the door, and in comes this woman. She has gone through everything to get to that door, but she's not going to back down. And when she walks through the door, I see why. She's this really sweet woman who is also was also born without arms. And she's been living in Ghana her entire life. And she just says, "I just needed to tell you how much I appreciate that you came here to Ghana to share the story of your birth and the things that you do." Because when I was born, and she was telling me her story about how people in her community said she needed to be abandoned in the wilderness. So they advised her mother to go and abandon her in the wilderness. And of course, her mother didn't do that. Her father left, blaming her mother for this
Wow.
situation, having a child without arms. And then the mother had to raise her in hiding for all these years. And then some people came to her village and heard about the story and decided to give Louisa an education. And Louisa now is an elementary school teacher. But there's still stigma. And the stigma is what we were trying to change and shape around the country. And that's what she really appreciated, is that we were there to do that. And that was what was so special, and a reminder of what we do and why we do what we do.
So I'm going to go through several of your quotes that I wrote down from your book. And at first I had like 13. I finally whittled it down to four. So here we go. Your greatest disability is the one you place on yourself. When I read that to you and you hear your own voice saying that and living it, tell our listeners and viewers what it means to you and them.
Well, you know what? I really don't see myself as someone with a disability, and I understand, it's as a term that's used, but I don't see that. And I think that people oftentimes disable themselves, I guess, with their own limited mindsets. And it's really about not putting those limitations on yourself, but breaking free of them. And I'm so glad you're sharing some of these quotes because I wrote that book over a decade ago. Thanks, John, for reading my book.
You're welcome. I'm always trying to bump up my friends on Amazon and in bookstores, so you are welcome. It was worth reading. I enjoyed it, obviously. Speaking about disabilities, you also wrote this: fear is the biggest disability of them all. And then you wrote, it stops us from living.
Yeah.
In your own words now, kind of outside of the book, tell me what that means.
Well, if I would have stopped at becoming a pilot, and like I always say, on the other side of fear, and when you conquer your fear, there's everything you've ever wanted. And so we can't let fear stop us from doing those things, even though it's a little uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
But knowing that we've done something despite the fear of it is so powerful. It boosts our confidence significantly.
I decided early on that I wasn't going to let other people's expectations of me define me.
That was since a very young age, where from the moment people would say things like, in the 90s, the term handicap was politically acceptable. And they'd say things, you have a handicap, you can't do that. I made a decision, I mean, as early as like 5 or 6, to not let those labels and the limitations that people wanted to put on me to affect me.
Help me understand how I can do that in my life. Help me understand how I can teach my little ones, I have four, to do that in their lives, and help our listeners understand how we can do that in ours. Because I think so many of us cap our ceiling. So, how do you help us remove that and move forward?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think you're doing probably an amazing job with your four little ones. So give yourself some grace and definitely, I know it's probably a constant challenge. I do the same thing with my little nieces. I have a 8-year-old niece, a 6-year-old niece, a 4-year-old niece, and a 1-year-old nephew. And so I like to give them that example of anything is possible and to really stretch their expectations and tell them that, being uncomfortable is okay.
Right.
Because when we are in a place where we may not feel certain about certain things and we're going to be learning all we can, we elevate our awareness, do everything we can. And actually, that discomfort can serve us. It serves us to help us to grow more.
Mm, that's so good. All right, final quote, and then we'll move into what we call the Live Inspired Seven. I love this quote, though. Confidence does not come from having all the answers. It comes from not being afraid to try.
And that's the going overcoming the fear as well, because a lot of times people have this fear of failure. But if we can get past that and recognize that failure is actually a learning experience, is a learning opportunity, then we'll approach things differently. We'll be more inclined to want to try because we know there's no such thing as failing
Hmm.
and that it is an opportunity to learn. So it's again just really reframing the way that we see failure.
So, my friend, you can go below the sea because you know how to scuba. You can go above the clouds because you know how to fly. You can move forward in life. You've been in 25 countries. You're married to the love of your life. Things are going brilliantly right now. As you look ahead, what's next?
Wow. Well, God has great plans. And ultimately, I want to use that story to bring glory to Him and to be able to, again, give hope to so many out there. And the saying is, you don't need arms to lift people up. Touching people, it's such a beautiful gift. And I'm going to reach and continue to do this as often as I can to all the places I get invited to. And I mean, I can only do so much traveling because I just got back from abroad like a couple weeks ago. It's exhausting, but I'm going to do the best I can to continue to be out there and getting that message and join you in the force to really help others around the world.
Tell me about the impossible plane build.
We are building the first ever airplane in aviation history that can be flown with feet. And here at the back of my shirt, I know the listeners probably can't see this, but some of the viewers can probably. But I have
Hmm.
a picture of the impossible. Well, it says we're building the impossible airplane, and it is going to be finished by the end of this year. A team of volunteers have helped build this literally out of a kit, and we're going to have modifications in the pilot command seat, which is the left seat, so that I can fly it in a lot more comfortable way than how I've been flying over the past 15 years. So now I can do more and it's more practical where I can go and hop in the plane, head over to a school where maybe a child without arms is learning how to tie their shoelaces or overcome some kind of challenge and be a voice and an advocate. So we have great plans for this. The big goal is to fly it over the Paralympic opening ceremonies. So in LA in 2028. So we hope to do that. If you can help me with any of that, John, let me know.
Hey, you know what? It's amazing who listens to this podcast and who they know. So although I don't know exactly who to make the phone call to, I promise you someone listening to our conversation does.
That would be awesome. Yeah, we're also coming up on a we just did a fundraising goal. Someone is going to match $10,000 and we're closing in on that final fundraising goal for, once we finish, we're at about 5,000 now. Once we get that other five, we'll have someone who's going to match it. And that's going to help with some of these extra costs involved with building the plane. And we have such great plans for when it's finished, which if it's finished by the end of this year, we'll do test flying in the beginning of next. And then we could start in the spring of 2026 to do some amazing work to reach out to the world and share the message that disability doesn't mean inability.
Jessica, there's so many folks listening to our conversation who wrestle with their own disability, some external, most internal. And what's your advice before we shift gears into the final seven questions that you want to encourage them to know about their life?
I think that those who are feeling perhaps like, there's a lot of hard challenges, I just want to encourage you to recognize that our challenges can be turned around to be our greatest gifts. And we all have been blessed in so many ways. It's just really about reframing it and working with it, working through it, and becoming ultimately stronger because of it.
My friends, the conversation that I'm having right now with Jessica Cox, we are approaching landing. We're about a mile and a half out, so we got to get her back in the jump seat. We're going to walk through the final seven questions together. Question number one from the Live Inspired Seven, Jessica, is what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
The most impactful book, I think it was The Secret, and I think that it's been many years since I read that book, but that was a pretty spectacular book.
What's one positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little girl, getting on that school bus that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Ooh, I was about to say stubbornness, but I'm pretty stubborn as it is.
I see Patrick nodding his head. It's the first
Yeah.
time spoken to me all day, but there he is. Blink twice, Patrick, if you're okay.
Yeah, that young girl who just had the zest to just go out and do everything in the world. I've tapered that down a little, but I think that's still something you can carry on with you for the rest of your life, no matter how old you are.
Man, if that little girl had more zest for living and accomplishing and doing than you, I can't even imagine what she was like. That
Yeah.
fierceness. I mean, what a gift to have the desire to do the next right thing in your life. That's awesome. If your home caught fire and all living things are out, Patrick's out, your furry baby's out, and you have an opportunity of running back in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you would grab?
Oh, it's going to be an album with the memories of some of the most fond memories. My mother has passed on, and it's going to be her ninth anniversary of passing on. But I would have something, a momentum of hers as well.
Which one?
I just probably be a picture of her. And there's this one picture of her standing right on like right next to a mountainside, and she just has her arms stretched like she's just ready to conquer the world. And that was my mom.
Well, the apple has not fallen far from the tree, man. So congratulations on serving her well as you live forward in your life. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay, so there was a woman who actually attempted to fly a plane. She was born with partial arms. So she had arms to her elbows. And this was from the 1930s, around Amelia Earhart's time. She attempted to fly a plane and she got to a point where, but this was with modifications to her arms. So she had some prosthetic limbs with her arms as opposed to using her feet.
Yeah.
And she modified this plane with the help of some engineer and was able to fly. However, when she went to try and convince at the time what was the equivalent to the Federal Aviation Administration why she should be able to have a license, she was on her way flying across country to do so and ran out of fuel over Texas. And we all know Texas is a huge state. So she ended up dying in the attempt. But to talk to her a little bit about her flying adventures, She seemed like quite a woman.
What's the best advice she, your mom, your dad, or anyone else ever gave you? So the best advice you've ever received is,
I love this quote that someone shared with me. No one can make you feel inferior without your permission. And that's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote, if I'm correct. I'm pretty sure that's it. I love that because that helps you to really figure things out and stand up for yourself and be your best version of yourself.
what advice would you give yourself at age 20? If you could go back just a couple years, back to the college days, and whisper some wisdom your way, what would it be?
Oh, because I had such a zest for getting things done and doing things and going out there and being there, I wanted it right away. And I would just tell to my younger self, hey, just take this easy. It's the journey that matters, and there's no real rush. You're going to eventually get there. Just
Hmm.
enjoy the ride.
Captain Jessica Cox, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
Live life to the fullest.
Well, she certainly did, whether above the clouds or below the water, or with Patrick taking a walk around the neighborhood. This is a woman who traveled the world, lived life to the fullest, and through her words and her example, taught the rest of us that we can too. Jessica, I want to thank you for the time today and for the example you are.
Thank you so much, John, too. I want to sit down and do the same exact thing and ask you these questions now that we're connected.
My friends, that is Jessica Cox. My name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired. Well, my friends, I told you on the front side that you were going to need to buckle up for the ride because we were going to soar. And I think that's exactly what we did with our captain, Jessica, at the helm. I'm so glad that you went up into the air with us, that you were reminded again that the challenges you face and we face don't have to define the future that is ahead. She is the embodiment of this. And I think you and I are called to model that type of hope, that type of ambition, that type of faithfulness into a marketplace that is longing for it. If you're looking for another episode to get your feet back off the ground, to be filled up with hope and encouragement, can I encourage you to check out the episode we recorded about a year ago with my brother, John Foppy. Early in my career as a speaker, John got a hold of me and helped me take the next right step forward. Early in Jessica's career as a speaker, he did the same for her. And in listening to the conversation with John, I think you will get that same kind of encouragement, whether you want to become a speaker or you just want to make a mightier difference through the breath that you have in your lungs. If you want to learn more about the episode with John Foppy, check it out. It's at episode 672. If you can't find it on the Live Inspired podcast channel, cruise over with me instead to johnolearyinspires.com. One more time, I'll let you slow down and take notes. johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. And in the show notes of today's episode, I will have a link directly into John Foppy's episode. My friends, as always, I'm so grateful that we have an opportunity week over week of bringing you these remarkable individuals who show up on our show, not to brag about their life, but to celebrate in their experiences what is possible in yours. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. And today, family, is your day. What a gift. Live inspired and keep soaring.